Today on We Are All in This Together, I talked to Sami Kahl, who is a sophomore at David Douglas High School, and her grandfather, Sam Kahl, who is a political activist and classical music enthusiast.
So, Sami, I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what your life was like before this pandemic happened and what's changed.
I guess before this, I was obviously used to going to school every day, but I was used to seeing more people, I think, is the main change I think of. I can text my friends and whatever, but all of us are talking about how we're kind of getting touch-starved because we're just around our families. I have a little brother, and it's starting to get to the point that I don't know how we're going to last another month in the same house with each other.
What do you find hardest about not being able to have face-to-face communication with your friends?
I think it's harder for me to be able to know when people are being sarcastic or making jokes or what they're thinking about something over text. And even over call, it's easier than text, but it's harder than face-to-face where I can see what they look like as they're saying something. So it means I have to ask for clarification about that type of thing a lot more. I know there are some friends I talk to only ever over text, but that's because we don't go to the same school and we'd have to coordinate meeting up, so it's easier to text than try to set all of that up just to communicate. But most of us that go to the same school usually will end off a texting conversation with something like, see you tomorrow. And in person, I think we tend to sort of touch each other a lot more because we can communicate at a distance, but there's something about touching another person that's comforting, I guess.
Have you found any ways to cope with this situation that is really strange for everybody, I think?
My family's sort of set up a routine for us. Like every morning now, my dad's having us do an exercise thing, so we have something that we know is going to happen every day regardless. And on my own, I think I've started to look at the work we were assigned, like, before school shut down, so I can read over it and sort of know what I'm going to be getting back into when I start getting assignments.
Do you find that you miss actually being in school, or is it nice to have a break from school?
I think it's sort of nice having a break, and this week would technically be when my school spring break was anyway, but it is starting to get to the point where I'm getting a little bit twitchy about not being able to hear directly what an assignment's going to be, especially with classes like math, where it's sort of important that we're there and learning all of it every day, but they can't really send us assignments over email so much.
What worries you most about this situation?
I think for me it would mainly be that I know I have no real control over this, and in some ways that helps because I don't feel like I have a responsibility to fix things like I might with something closer to home. But on the other hand, something that's so clearly out of my control could go in so many directions, and sometimes it feels like I wouldn't be able to affect anything.
When you are allowed to go out again, what's the first thing you want to do?
Probably the first thing I'm going to want to do is go back to school and get to see my friends in person. It's been like 2 weeks since I've seen them last, and I'm already texting them how I miss you. I swear I'm just going to hug you for like 5 minutes straight when I see you again.
introduced me to Harry Potter. I'm the one who introduced her to American history.
I am speaking with Sam Kahl, who is a political activist and a classical music enthusiast. How has your life changed as a result of this pandemic situation that we're in?
Hunkering down hasn't been a huge problem. I haven't seen my grandkids in person in over a week, and it's who knows how long this is going to last. That's the big hardship. But I'm basically, and I do like mixing with friends from time to time, but I am very easily a solitary person who can hole up with my piano and my books and work on projects and do chores. I was just sitting right now next to the piano. I was working on a fugue of Bach and a part of a sonata of Beethoven, looking at some sketches. But this morning it was mostly chores, some emails. When I'm done with this interview, I'll probably go get some fresh air and come back in and look over the emails again and work on my compositions. If one of my grandkids call and they do, especially I love it. One of my grandkids loves to call on the phone on a video where I can, Tony and I can read stories to him. That's always great. That'll, change the pace.
We've seen a lot of changes in the last week or so. From a political point of view, what concerns or worries you the most?
Well, I'll put it this way. I've grown up in a period where we've changed. Our country has always had this dialogue about which should come first, the government and its stewardship over the public good, or private enterprise with the market forces basically dominating. And I don't have to get into any of the ideological debates about this. With market, it's basically you're in it to get profit, personal advancement, whatever the public good may be out of it. But there are certain things that we have recognized, usually in crises, that we depend on in common. That's your common good. And it's usually in the form of, well, what happens if you have a natural disaster? What happens if you have a pandemic? What happens if you have a crop failure? Things like that. You start seeing, now I see why we have social mechanisms, social organizations, and why you got agencies like a federal government who can coordinate all this. So the dialogue that has taken place from out of my high school years shifted towards, government is too big. We spend too much time trying to regulate things. What we need to do is loosen up, get the markets working. Well, what's the result of that? I'll use the example. I'll just pin it down. I can use many examples, but this business with the coronavirus brings it to light. I forgot the exact numbers, but back when I was a boy, the system of medical care system said prescribed 4.5 beds per 1,000 people, something like that. It was prescribed from a wartime mobilization. We came right out of World War II, and we said that's what you need if you're going to be prepared. Be prepared. You don't want to be caught off guard. Well, what happens under that kind of thinking, that kind of preparedness is if you got 3 beds that are not being used, big deal. That's what we need. We have it, just like you have a peacetime army. You keep it in place. Now shift the market. Now, if you start farming that out to private enterprise naturally looks at
Sam Kahl.
beds and says, well, what good are they? They're not making us any money. We either have to get people using them in some way or we got to make space for something else. And so, you can see, not just from this pandemic, but the hurricanes. Hurricane Katrina is the big one that most people think about. We as a nation have ceased to really provide for our infrastructure. whether it's a production infrastructure or healthcare infrastructure or school infrastructure, and that's your immune system. And so what I'm looking at is, one more time, we got an emergency. This is a huge one. What are we going to do? Well, you kind of feel people and our leadership thinking in terms of, well, how do we get in this mess? How do we reorganize ourselves maybe to not only overcome this immediate emergency, but be prepared for others? Except I'm looking at that $6 trillion package, and I'm finding $4.5 trillion, $4 to $4.5 trillion is going to salvage the financial system. And that would be fine if you could demonstrate to me that their investments are going into real production. But it's not. It's basically buyback options and shoring up a bankrupt financial system that needs to go into reorganization. So my concern is basically, why are we still stuck on watching the stock markets instead of going out and doing an inventory of not only who's being affected by the coronavirus and what kind of healthcare infrastructure do we have? Can we mobilize? But also what's happening with our farms and our manufacturing and our food supplies, things like that. I'd rather go there, and I'd rather put the whole Wall Street system either on hold, a bank holiday, or on a, better yet, a reorganization. Find out what it's really worth, and if you've got some real assets, put it to work. If not, declare bankruptcy.
What's the best possibility or scenario you could see for us moving forward?
The best would be, this is a tall order, but it's the way to go, and we've done it sometimes crisis. I call it the Franklin Roosevelt moment, not because of the man, but the administration, that whole approach to the Depression. What I hope is when it's all done, we say, wait a minute, now let's get back here. This things haven't worked before. So let's go back and reorganize the way we do business in terms of our public affairs and the role of government in it. I'm hoping we actually go back to a New Deal type of approach, to put it simply. You've got to organize the nation around projects and infrastructure that we are going to need in common to produce our food, to trade with each other, and sometimes to defend against, an invasion or a natural disaster.
I am Suzanne LaGrande, and this is We Are All in This Together.